It's a privilege. It's a long time coming. Talking to my brother Lawrence Ross, acclaimed author, speaker, and new Knicks fan. Is that right?
So I'm like every Laker fan, right?
That's right.
So I'm a diehard Laker fan, but anytime, so the Knicks just so happened the last 2 years to go up against the evil empire that is the Boston Celtics,
That's
right?
right.
So the joke is that I when the Lakers are out, right,
Right.
or as I like to say, when the Lakers decide to not participate in the playoffs. So I for some reason the tradition has been because the Knicks were playing Boston,
Right.
and I hate the Celtics
Of course.
that I become a Knicks fan, right? But I'm
Yeah.
I'm conditional Knicks fan. I'm a Knicks fan when we win. That's my Knicks,
That's right.
and when they lose, they're y'all Knicks.
That's all.
And so so right now they're my Knicks.
That's
They
right.
they won, but if they lose Game 6, I've
Go
never
back to
seen them
me.
in my life.
That's right.
They throw it right back to y'all. So
Yes,
so
sir.
no, I'm right now. I'm the greatest Knicks fan you could ever have,
Oh, for sure.
except in about 24 hours.
I'm
We'll
about to say,
see
we'll
how
see
they
how it
go.
goes. We'll see if you
We'll
last
see how
till
it go.
Sunday, right?
Yeah, we'll see if it lasts. So
Good
because
point.
the last, I mean, there is a tangential, connection because the last championship the Knicks won was over
Yeah.
my Lakers. You know, I
That's
was,
right,
I
right, right.
was, I, I was literally. This tells you how old I am. I was 7 years old when that occurred. So
Come
I'm,
on.
and my age is big back age. So,
That's right.
so,
That's right.
so if they pose no threat to me,
No,
as the Knicks. If they do great, great. My Lakers still have Luka Doncic. I'm very
that's
happy
it. No,
about that.
you're sitting pretty. And when I'll tell you this, when I saw that Luca trade happen, I was like, of course he goes to the Lakers. Where else would he
I
go?
it because I try to explain to people we are Thanos. We are
Clearly,
the we are inevitable.
that's right.
and so
That's
and
right.
so if just people just if rational people just realize that the Los Angeles Lakers are the greatest organization ever to walk this earth, then everything would be great for you.
That's
But
it. So
you
simple.
know, it's so simple. I just try to keep it simple. Just root for the Lakers. Your life will be great.
But, well, I'll tell you this. I have two sons. One's 10, one's 8 years old, and they're now. This is their first year getting really into basketball. So I'm like, now they're gonna be Knicks fans for life. Like I was like, thank God.
Do you really?
This is the perfect
Where's
time.
is the do you guys have the child services? Uh,
Right. This might. If you're a man
because
named
you are
Reporter.
condemning him. You are
That's right.
condemning them to a life of just maybe we can get this far, please.
That's right.
So, I mean, my son, it was hilarious. Is that my son just literally didn't care, right?
Oh
And
man.
so my son is both. My son is a third degree martial artist. He's
Dope,
third degree
dope.
black belt, and so he cared about martial arts
Yeah.
and he cared about track. Everything else, he was just like, when he was a kid, he was like, Daddy, that's Daddy going nuts over that,
That's
right?
right.
And so I always tell this story about, I decided to take him to a Cal football game, right?
Uh huh.
And he was like 4, and so we take the trip from LA to Oakland. He's hyped about the plane. We
Yeah.
get on the BART train. He's hyped about that.
Mm.
Frat, my best man and my best friend in the world, brings him a bag of candy. He's hyped about Uncle Rob. He
Right.
gets to the game. He Before the game, he's thrilled, and then as soon as kickoff happens, he goes to sleep.
Yeah.
And then the whole game goes on. He goes to sleep. Then he wakes up at the end of the game. We get
Uh,
back on BART. He's hyped about that.
right.
Get back on the plane. He's hyped about that. My wife asked, "How did you like the game?" He was like, "It was awesome." He didn't see
That's
a
right.
single second
No.
of the game. So that told me right there. I was like, this kid ain't gonna be addicted to sports. He is
No.
addicted to art. He got his degree in art,
Right.
uh, manga, and anime. That's
Oh,
that's his stuff. So
that's it.
so we kid each other if we find cross references,
Right.
then we joke. He's like, "Hey, Daddy, hey, did you see this basketball anime?" And I'm like, "Of course not."
Come on. Right.
And
Right.
then
Right.
I see some, and if I get any reference, I'm like, "I understand Naruto now." That type of stuff and
No.
everything. So,
Same.
so,
Same. Yeah, 'cause my
it's
son showed
hilarious.
me like I think it's called Blue Lock. It's like soccer anime.
Yeah, they all got they have this one where he showed me where it was called there's a famous thing called the Dempsey Roll.
Uh huh.
And there is this anime that had the Dempsey Roll in it. And the Dempsey Roll, for anybody who doesn't understand, Jack Dempsey was a small man, it's like about 175 pounds, and he
Right.
fought all these big giants and stuff. And the Dempsey roll is something that Tyson used too.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically when you roll your shoulder and then your other shoulder still has power, and then you come like this. And so a smaller man, if you use it, a smaller man will always have leverage over a bigger man. It's almost like attacking. Have you ever seen Mike Tyson, attack people? He would move his head and then he would hit and then boom and then knock them out.
Right.
And so there was an anime with a Dempsey roll. He was like, "Daddy, you talked about this," because I would tell him in his martial arts he needs to do the Dempsey roll, and then it didn't matter until he saw it in anime. Then he was like, "Oh, my dad's a genius," you know. But,
Now
but
it
it,
makes sense.
yeah. But then again, we used to walk into a bookstore. He was again like 3 or 4 years old,
Uh,
and my wife would go, "Hey, Langston, that's Daddy's book." He'd be like, "Whatever," and then go straight to the Naruto books. He didn't like, I
Walking
don't
right
care about.
past.
Walk right past it. He was like Naruto. I was like, all right, now let me go buy all these Narutos and
I'm
stuff. So
telling you, man.
yeah,
That's
man.
how it goes. But how did you know in yourself that writing was going to be your passion? Like what age was it? When did you first realize like this is something that's going to be central to your life?
So it's a combination of different things. So I always joke, and this is absolutely true story.
Yeah, yeah.
My mom is my personal philosophy. So my mom used to introduce me like, back when I was like 10 years old, and my sister who's like 3 years younger.
Mm.
She used to say, "That's my daughter Shauna," and then that's my son Lawrence. He's my black child. Okay, so it's actually how she used to introduce me, right?
Amazing.
Because I was just like blackity, 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 black.
Yeah.
I did, I read so much, right? I read so many books. Like
Yeah.
I grew up in Inglewood, California,
Got you.
and I stayed at the library. Like in the summers, I would just get down. I would ride my bike over to the main library
Uh-huh.
and just literally get a pile of books, sit down in the aisle, not in the regular stuff, just sit down in the aisle and just devour them, right?
Right.
And so I'm like everybody else. Nobody really kind of knows what you're gonna do. You just know
For
that
sure.
you're good at it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And honestly, it's weird, but it starts with kind of a care for words and a care for uh, understanding and wanting the search for understanding with words, right?
Hmm.
Not feeling a limitation that if you don't know something, um, constantly trying to understand how you can use words and story as a weapon to get across whatever kind of thoughts that you have. And
Right.
that, I think, my earliest goes, like elementary school. I had actually forgotten this, but I was like head of the yearbook. I mean, elementary school. I completely forgot about it,
Right.
but I had done little things. I went to an all boys Catholic school, kind of like the most prestigious one out here, called Loyola High School,
Got you.
and and um, and my boys used to have me because they knew I had great cursive writing and
Uh-huh.
I had a way with words. They paid me $5 to write a love letter to the girls,
Oh,
or
that's
anything like
dope.
that. And I was like, "All right, cool, $5." I said, "What you trying to say?" And they're like, "Da da da da." I said that.
Yeah.
So I started, with my love of words, my love of story, love of Black people, to tell all those things, and my love of history combined, and to tell all those different stories. And in my first professional writing, kind of like, okay, I'm gonna take this for real, was I got a job. My first gig was in the early '90s, and it was for the National Newspapers Publishers Association, which is a syndication for Black newspapers.
Oh,
And so I wrote a column. I think it was called the Black Web. It
hmm.
was explaining to Black people this new thing called the internet. And so, now to tell you how that was kind of revolutionary, I told my mom, right?
Yeah.
Because about the same time, my buddy and I decided to start this internet service providing company called, we were like the first on the West Coast, called RBG Online, Red, Black, and Green Online.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I remember telling my mom about it, and my mom was like, I don't see a use for it. And so
Man.
I was like, well, you got that vision, Bob,
Right.
that type of deal.
Right, right.
It's gonna be big,
Right, yeah.
So I did that, and then I wrote these columns, and then if for anybody out here who's a writer, who's trying to kind of figure that stuff out, as I tell young writers, basically what you almost always do is you're trying to accumulate as many different types of writing voices as possible, right?
Yeah.
And in order to kind of navigate to your own, you never have your own voice at the very beginning. You kind of emulate the voices that you love.
So real.
So my voices will always be the two people, really like the three people that I find to be, you know, instrumental in how I see the world and how you communicate the world. The first would be Mark Twain in terms of being able to take social commentary and interweave it with a story.
Right.
Um, One of the misnomers, say for example, because we read it in contemporary times, we bring it our own contemporary um, understanding to it is like not understanding, say for example, like Huck Finn, right? And how revolutionary Huck Finn actually was. And
For sure.
a lot of times, I think as writers, we have to observe the world, we have to observe what's happening, and we have to understand the subtext underneath it beyond what's right there.
Hmm.
And Huck Finn is basically the first depiction of a black character as a human by a
Right.
white American, right?
Right.
And what people forget is that Nigga Jim is not designed as a slur. It is designed as a reflection of the society of how they
Right.
see him, and Huck is seeing him as a human being, which is the reason why he can't bring him in. He's Mark Twain is saying he is not a nigga. He is
Right.
a human being, right? So okay, so that Nikki Giovanni, who actually became my friend.
Come on.
Yeah, so it was the most awesome moment in that I was at the Delta convention signing Divine Nines,
Uh-huh.
and right when it first came out, and my back was turned, and I heard this woman say, "Hey, is that Lawrence Ross, the author of the Divine Nine?" I turned around, it's Nikki Giovanni, and somebody got a picture of it because I was so damn shocked.
Right.
Okay, and so we became really great friends. She eventually wrote the forward to the Divine Nine, subsequent
Mm-hmm.
editions, and I spent a crazy day with her one time in Blacksburg in
Oh,
Virginia Tech,
Virginia. Uh-huh.
and I laughed because she used to have a red kind of sports car, and
Yeah.
she's driving, and she's driving, and I can talk. Nikki Giovanni can out talk me, which is insane. Okay, so Nikki Giovanni's talking, and she's looking at me as she's talking, and we're winding down mountain roads in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and she's
Right.
just looking at me, and I was like, that's how it's going to end. I said,
This is it.
I'm going to make the New York Times, but it's going to be a obituary for Nikki Giovanni. I'm going to be unknown black man. Black
Unknown
male
black
was killed
man.
at the exact same time, and that's going to be my New York Times moment. So so that was that. And then my number one influence in terms of how I see the world and how it kind of connected that idea of history and black people, the love of black people, is Langston Hughes.
Oh,
Um, yeah, so we named our son Langston. You know,
come on.
at our club, the password is Langston Hughes. So
Let's go.
you use our internet all you want. I don't care.
Right.
But yeah, he was my most important influence, and it took a while, after you've been influenced by all these folks to then begin to discover what your particular voice is, right?
For sure.
You have to, at some point in time, writers write, and so you can't theorize writing. You have to
No.
write, right? And you have to learn from other writers, and then you take classes and all the rest of the stuff, but you have to write.
Yes.
And so after a while, I was able to develop my own sense of self, which kind of mixes humor, always absurdity. If you
For
note
sure.
in my stuff, what kind of captures people is the absurdity that I observed about the world.
Uh-huh.
And so that's how I got my voice. And so that was kind of like, I know that's a long-winded answer
No, but it's
for the question.
necessary.
Yeah, but it was basically that growth. And then we can talk about my first gigs if you like, in
No,
terms of being a writer.
here for
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say because I think about like just the breadth of things you've covered with writing. Like you're famous in Black Greek circles for the Divine Nine and
Hmm.
all the commentary you said about Greek life and higher education and race. Like, what do
Hmm.
you think people like misunderstand when you're writing about specific things like Black Greek culture?
Yeah, I think what happens. Okay, a couple of things. When you write a book like The Divine Nine, it's hilarious because oftentimes that's how people like define you, right?
Right, right.
Oh yeah, I got that book, and I'm like, that book was 25 years ago, and I've written seven other books, right?
Of course.
And that's the only Black Greek book I've written. right? But people think that I've written a bunch of them and all the rest of the stuff. That's not true.
Yeah, yeah.
I only had, in your writing career, you have various topics that either pop up, because you have a perspective and you think, oh, no one is noticing this, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
and for writers, particularly if you're writing nonfiction, you're writing uh, as an observer, as I mentioned before, but you're trying to observe before everybody else observes, right?
Right, right,
If
right.
I would say that if the arrow, of the spear is
Uh-huh.
right here, it's too late, right? It's
Come
too
on.
late. You have to observe the things in this world that other people don't, and so I think people kind of think that my main focus is always on Greekdom. It's just that I wrote the book, and then at the exact same time, I had points of view
Right.
about what we could do to have a healthy Divine Nine,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And some of those views, in terms of anti-hazing, I've been a brother alpha for 40 years. This,
Come on.
yeah, since my freshman year. I still look good, y'all. I'm 59, but I still look good.
You're shocking the viewers, Lord. It's like
Yeah. I mean, I was a 19-year-old. I was a 19-year-old when I crossed and everything. I was second semester freshman, so don't get it twisted. I ain't sitting up there at 90 years old.
that's right.
But um, but the biggest thing is that I always try to tell people is that it. I'm a life member, of Alpha Phi Alpha, but I love all the organizations, and my
For
whole
sure.
idea is that the thing that allows us to thrive is to make sure that we're all healthy at the same time. It does no
Right.
good for Alpha to be healthy, or Alpha to be sick and other people to thrive, right?
Right.
I mean, we have to make it to where we all thrive, and that's kind of been my main point of view. However, having said all that, as a writer, my biggest point of view in terms of like, if you sit down all my canon, over a period of time, it will always be based upon finding different things about Black people that we didn't know before, right?
Right.
And it depends on the execution. You like, I always tell people, I was like, I read my second book, I was like, whoo, that was a tough read, because I was like, I was like, I don't know how I was writing it, but writing is like everything. You grow as you go. You
Oh,
get
for sure.
better, and you learn better, and you write better books as you go along.
For sure.
And so that's kind of like the biggest. Um, and then also, I think misconceptions as a writer is like people really believe that you make a whole bunch of money writing. And that's
Right.
not true.
Yeah,
People
yeah.
believe that if they see bestseller on something and they don't understand how bestsellers are actually created, they think,
Right.
ah, man, you
You made
made
it.
millions of dollars, because they look at the market and they go over here. Well, I'm like, well,
Right.
not everybody buys your book. It's hard to sell a single book.
For sure.
And if you're lucky enough to be able to make back your advance, honestly, you typically, I mean, most working class writers, I'm a working class writer. Okay.
Gotcha.
It's what we call in the industry a mid-list author, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And most authors are making, I mean, if you extrapolate it, I mean, amortize it basically out,
Right.
it's almost close to minimum wage in term. Yeah, it's, I mean, by the amount of hours that you have to take to write
Right. To
compared to what you actually receive, it is not, I mean, the big gigantic advances that you hear are honestly two different kind of double-edged sword, right?
come on.
It's like if you have a big advance and you don't make that advance back, that might be the last of your books,
Right.
right? And if you have smaller advances, but you make that advance back, then you can have a longer career and you have
For
more
sure.
things to say. So, I like money like anybody else, because my motto is I write things for money and I don't believe in contributing to the racial wealth gap. So
Hello.
that's what my agents go out there and say. But at the
Right.
exact same time, I mean, I think I got paid $15,000 for the Divine Nine in
Come
2000.
on.
Oh, excuse me, that was in 1997 when I
Got
when
you.
I
Got
when I
you. Got
actually
you.
did. It. But when it came out, yeah, $15,000.
Yeah.
So it was $750, 7,500 minus 15% for my agent, and
Right.
7,500 minus 15% on the back end, and that was it. Yeah, and so everything else is like how much you can kind of work it to get it all going and stuff like that.
So when you first realized that, or whenever you've been in it for a while, like what
But
kept you going? Because you know this whole notion that a lot of people associate. I don't think just with books. I think with all forms of entertainment, this sense of like because you're on TV, you must be
hmm
rich, or because I
right,
hear your song on the radio, you must be
yeah,
rich. Like,
Yeah.
what allows you to keep going? What is your source of it? Not just, obviously the joy aspect of it, but like, in the sense of like, this is something I want to keep doing as a form of making a living.
Well, I think that the two different things. I think you have to have a great understanding about who and what you are.
Sure.
There are a lot of people who decide that they want to do this because they really, really, really want fame.
Yeah.
Okay. And I always talk about the fame is corrosive. It is
Come
absolutely
on.
corrosive. And one of the things that happens, I'm a big fish in a small pond, right?
Got you.
In that people know me in a small pond, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't wish at all to be any bigger than that.
I hear you.
I've always said that your anonymity is the most valuable thing that you have. It
True.
is, and people don't believe me because now we live in a society in which everybody's trying to create a personal brand, and
Right.
they want to get famous, and they
Right.
have to have X amount of people as their followers and their influencers, and blah blah blah. And what happens is that I do not begrudge whatever fame that I've received, because that's opened doors for me to be able to keep writing and be able to do all this stuff. But my point is never, and has never been, to be famous, or I'm almost like a reluctant interview.
I hear you.
My wife has to convince me to do interviews, like during the Kamala Harris, was
Right.
going on. People were just calling everywhere around the world, and
Of
I do
course.
not want to do that. And she was like, "Well, who's going to speak on the thing?" And I was like, "All right, okay." But I think the critical thing, and this is in one's life, no matter what you're doing, is like, what is it that you want to accomplish in your life to represent you,
Yeah.
but also represent how you affected your community. For me, Black community, right?
Hmm.
And because nobody cared when you did. Nobody cares about your car or how much money is in your bank
Come
account.
on.
Nobody cares. Nobody
No.
cares about that. And that's not the value.
Right.
The value is, how do you affect others with it? And
Yeah.
with books, one of the things that you can never expect when you write a book is how people come up to you and tell you, oh my God, for the Divine Nine, it was like, this is how I decided on my organization, which was like the most life, changing thing.
Right.
Or with my book Blackballed, about racism on college campuses,
Yes.
I often get, folks who are like, I have been waiting for somebody to talk about my experience on, a PWI.
Right.
That is the responsibility of being a writer. You got to get it right, or as much, as right as you can possibly get.
Come on.
Critics are absolutely necessary, to say, hey, this is where you didn't get, or this wasn't the scope, or maybe you characterized this wrong. That's fine.
Yeah.
Writing a book is hard.
Right.
So, you're going to make mistakes, but you overall, if you can overall get it right, then and you have in your head, what is your purpose in life? And it's not to just accumulate money. I believe in getting money,
For sure.
but I don't believe in it to my getting up in the morning. The reason That's not my reason for getting up in the morning.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
reason for getting up in the morning is almost like, how we always say, I tell writers, the reason why writers write is to become immortal. Again,
Yeah.
I've talked to you about three writers who either just passed, have passed 60 years ago, passed on 100 years ago,
Right.
and they're still effective in generations, in a generation of electric cars, and all this other stuff, and
Right.
that they would never understand.
Yeah.
They're still within us, whether or not it's their poems, or whether or not it's their stories. They are within us, and as a writer, that's the gift. If
Yes.
you can make an impact, and a sincere impact, not just a superficial, so you can go out there and get something, so people can put a microphone in front of you, or so you can be on TV, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If you can make an impact that really reaches people, that's the fame that you want.
Yeah. I hear that. I hear
Yeah.
that. So talk to me a bit about your writing process. Like, I
Yeah.
think a lot of writers at the beginning have very romantic views of this, where they're gonna
Yeah.
have some
Yeah.
log cabin somewhere.
Yeah, I talk about that all the time. I say a lot of people who aspire to be writers, amateur writers, and everything. And I don't say amateur as a you know as a slur. I'm
No, no,
just
no.
saying those who are not really deciding to be professional writers.
Right, right,
Our frat, Eric Jerome Dickey,
right.
we used to meet up like every so often, like sometimes randomly. Sometimes we get together for coffee, right?
Uh-huh.
And he used to say that everybody thinks they're a writer because they got an A on their book report in the fifth grade.
Right.
So, which used to die, got me dying laughing. Um, So yeah, that's what I call like in the movies writing, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
or
yeah.
leisure or vacation writing. I get this all the time.
For
Every
sure.
Thanksgiving, every Thanksgiving, I get an uncle who got an idea. He's like nephew,
Let
you
me
know,
pitch it.
they pitch you this idea, or they just like, oh no, no, I'd have been a writer, but I just need some vacation time when I retire, and then I'm gonna
Yeah.
find me a cabin. I'm gonna give me a golden retriever on my feet, you know, and then I'm gonna type away. There's gonna be a fire, beautiful women just waiting to just let me do my thing and
That's
everything. It's
right.
gonna be a lake out there where I'll just be
Uh-huh.
pensive. No, no, no.
Not
I,
happening.
I wrote I wrote my first book with a toddler basically standing on my ear,
Come
right?
on.
A toddler who did not understand AM and PM. He just
No.
was like, "Yo, I'm up,"
Right.
that type of stuff, right?
Right.
So get to writing, kid. So
Seriously.
so my writing process is, and this is by the way, if I'm not trying to hard sell anybody, but if anybody's interested in kind of like replicating my writing process, I teach a story, a 12-week workshop.
Yeah, yeah.
It's expensive. I was gonna say it. It's 1,500, to do,
For sure.
but it's about organization. It's
Uh-huh.
about organization, and that's the thing that people don't understand, because we don't teach writing books on from K to 16, right?
Right.
We teach write me an essay for 1,000 words, and if you're at 900 words, you can keep saying, and just as I said before, to fill it
That's
all the
right.
way up,
Checking the word
right?
count.
Yeah, check out a word count. Writing a book requires it's a discipline like anything else, and it
For sure.
requires it's not about inspiration. That's the reason why people say they get writer's block, right? They get
Yeah.
inspiration, they start writing, and then they hit a roadblock because they don't know where they're going.
Yeah.
And if you're serious about writing, then you have to understand every element of writing. You need to understand plot structure, characterization, the various elements like conflict and the like, how to create scenes,
Right.
what is a chapter. All those things require more than just, even sometimes, even just books, where you
Yeah.
just read it. So a lot of times, I joke, I got my master's in fine arts from UCLA Film School in screenwriting. So I always say that I'm a recovering UCLA Film School grad. So, so, but you have to understand those things to give yourself a fighting chance,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
publishing is in the no business, meaning that the NO, right?
Right.
They are 90% of people who try to go get agents are rejected, and
Yeah.
90% of work that is sent to editors by agents is rejected,
Yeah.
right? So but that doesn't mean, and I'm not saying that to discourage,
No,
it just
no.
means that you just got to learn how to. I mean, I'm pretty sure if we like went to all of our various schools, there's a percentage of, oh, these people who got admitted and those people who didn't get
Of
admitted.
course.
Well, that percentage is based upon like, do you know what the parameters to stay in that 10%,
Right, right,
and
right.
and not ring the bell to get into the 90%. And that's the thing that oftentimes I can, just from anything, check out and see, oh, you're going to be right there in the no section. You sent a query to 250 200 folks. No, it's
Not
going to
happening.
be just like that. No, it's
Right.
not going to be like that. Yeah.
That's very real. That's very real. So when you're
Oh, but
writing,
I'm sorry, I didn't get to my process though.
oh,
I'm
go. Oh,
sorry.
yeah. No, you was
Yeah,
vibing.
yeah,
No, it made me
yeah,
forget my question. Go ahead.
yeah. No, no, no. So my process is this, right? So my process is this. You very much obviously come up with an idea, right?
Uh-huh.
I typically come up for some reason, and this is not something that everybody has to do, but I usually come up with pretty dope titles that
Uh-huh.
kind of evoke what the thing is, even if before I know
Got
what the
you.
story is. And then from there, it's a basic thing of research, because you have to realize that reality is not what we're looking for. What we're looking for is to create a universe that is unique, that
Yeah.
a person that is three different things. It has to be entertaining,
Uh-huh.
it has to be immersive, meaning I'm not going to take my eyes up from it, and it has to be unexpected. The things in it have to be unexpected.
Right.
But before you do all that, you have to basically just let yourself go down rabbit holes, right? Because your brain only has so much information that you've accumulated over your life, right? And if you rely upon that, that's a limiter,
Yeah.
right? It just limits you, right? You limit yourself to the types of people that you've met and the type of situations you've been in, and so on and so forth. You need to expand that in order to be able to create characters that are not like other characters, right?
Right.
And you have to understand how storylines have to be captivating. anecdotes aren't stories, right?
Yeah.
Anecdote, again, going back to my uncles was like, nephew, you need to write about me in Vietnam. And I'm like, okay, what happened? A bunch of stuff.
Bunch of stuff.
Like, okay, yeah, that's not a story, Uncle Jerry, but I love him to death. But he
That's
says
it.
this every Thanksgiving, right? So,
Ain't gonna he's not
people,
giving up.
he ain't giving up. No, no, not with a writer in the family. And so, he's going to keep going at it until I decide I'm going. And that's what I get. 90% of people come to me talking about they got a story. Can I write it? Because they can't write it. The
Right,
key
right.
part is that you can write it, but it's just people tend not to want to do the work. And if you don't do the work, then you're going to be stuck.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Do you feel like you have an imagined reader in mind? Like I know you talked about creating a world. Do you feel like, oh, this is gonna
That's a
resonate with
great
these
idea.
people?
That's a great idea. Not really.
Yeah.
Not really. I mean, my joke is this. Now, when you talk to your editor and the publisher, right, when they're looking to buy the book, they ask you who's your demographic, and I tell people I don't care what my book topic is. My demographic is always going to be the exact same people: Black women. Okay, it could be football on Mars.
Mars.
I'll be like, who's your demographic for this? Black women. I
Right.
said because honestly, Black women they never have a depression or recession when it comes to buying books,
Mm,
and they're also the most gracious human beings on the face of this earth.
come
When
on.
you write a book, even if they don't like your book, and now I'm gonna give you a clear example of this. Going back to Eric Joe Dickey, right?
Yes.
So he said we were joking about, because there's nothing more funny to me than book signings, okay?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
when you go up there reading, everybody wants to do a book signing when you're an author, but I'm just like, okay, cool. I don't understand why y'all want my signature, but
Right.
okay, I'll give it to you. But Eric talked about the one time he had finished doing his reading, and this woman stood up and she said, I couldn't stand this book. I couldn't stand the cover. I can't stand the characters. I didn't like the story. I didn't like the plot. Could you sign this for my daughter, though? He- and he was like, sure. He signed the book. That's kind of like what you get. But sisters will support you, and I always say I hope I supported them in the same way.
Facts.
Um, but will support you to the nth degree,
Yeah.
and they will take ownership of you. I this is God, I can't even believe how many years ago. This was at the Delta convention.
Yeah, yeah.
They had a literary like a literary lounge type of deal. It
Uh-huh.
was like about 1,500 of them, right? And so I'm up there and I'm doing my thing and everything, and all the deltas from Berkeley, every single delta from Berkeley
Oh
was
boy.
like, I knew him when he was 18 years old. They was out there. I was like, okay, all right. They was like, I remember when he was online. And
Come
I was
on.
like,
Telling
and they was out
stories.
there, they was out there selling my book. Basically, I was just like, oh, okay. I was
Yeah,
like the book.
they give you a
So
distribution.
distribution, they was telling the stories. I didn't have to tell stories.
No, no,
So
no.
so no. If you say what is my readership, it's almost always Black. But I don't write toward my reader, right?
I got
I
you.
write toward I write toward what is my interest, and the best way to what serves the story. If you chase a reader, you won't catch the reader,
That's
because you
good.
have no idea what is going to be the thing. Your story better be good, right?
Yeah.
Or your topic better be well executed. And
Right.
if it's not, then you're going to find yourself, thinking, well, why don't they like it, right?
Yeah.
And you write the best story, it will find its readership.
For
You
sure.
write the best story possibly. Nothing in your book should be waste. You should every word has to be crafted in a way, to your best, to your best ability.
Right.
There are always other. I get inspired by better writers than me, and I'm always looking for better writers,
For
because that
sure.
inspires me to be better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So switching gears a bit, I want to talk to you about your work with the Metaphor Club, the business.
Mhm.
I know you all just announced that it's going to be closing its doors July 1st, but
Yeah, after
uh,
7 years.
for after 7 years. So talk
Yeah.
talk to me a bit about as you're sort of like reflected now, like what have been the things that make you like really proud about the Metaphor Club?
Well, I think the thing that makes me really proud is that we getting with. So here, the origins of the Metaphor Club. So for those of you who don't know what the Metaphor Club is, the Metaphor Club is out here in Los Angeles on Crenshaw Boulevard, is a creative co-working space that I opened along with three of my frat brothers, Lawrence Gilliam, Jamar Wilson, and Gerald Rawls. And two of us went to Berkeley, different generations. Me and
Gotcha.
Jamar, I like you younger than me. Uh, and then Gerald went to Temple University, and Lawrence Gilliam unfortunately went to Stanford. And so,
Unfortunately.
so, the origins of it actually, and I joke with my boy, come from my boy Mark Lamont Hill. I did a book signing at his place, Uncle Bobby's Cafe.
Uh-huh.
And I joke with him because he's a Kappa. I'm like, all right, a
Right.
Kappa did for the one time inspired an Alpha, and everything's doing this stuff. So he's my boy, and
Oh yeah.
he's and it was so dope of a space that I was like, I would come here all the time.
Right.
And when I got back to LA, I had an idea because I was just like, I didn't really, after I went to that space, I didn't really want to go to Starbucks to write anymore.
Got
And
you.
so, I went over to, we had all been kicking out ideas of like working together, like at chapter meetings, things like that, but we
For
had never
sure.
really thought about what it was. And then I found a space and the idea, and I gathered them together, and they were all like 100% in. And then we found this space that had been closed for like 4 or 5 years. It had been a
Yeah.
restaurant. We joked that the grease had been in there since segregation. It was
Some Jim
no
Crow grease.
joke. It was Jim Crow grease. So it was like, but our wives all saw the vision and stuff like
Dope.
that, and whew, it was like literally like from February of 2018 to August
Yeah.
to take this bad boy down to the studs and
Wow.
really recreate it. But my most proud thing about it is that a number of things. My most proud thing is that one of our ethos, of our hidden ethos, was selflessness over selfishness, right?
Yes.
Particularly here in LA, particularly where you have a whole bunch of people who are like in the rat race to be in Hollywood and things like that, and they're trying to climb over everybody. We tried to prove that you didn't have to do that. You did not have to. My mantra is, you eating does not make me starve.
Come
You
on.
know, and so what we really did was go community over individualism, selflessness over selfishness, and I think that kind of resonated within the club.
Yeah.
The other thing we wanted to do was shrink access and privilege.
Hmm.
A lot of things in South, people say South LA. I'm old school. South Central LA
Yeah. Yeah.
is that um, a lot of like Black Hollywood, events, they happen in outside the Black community,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so we brought those people in, and it just so happened that we have a, my personal contact list. Basically, I use everybody in my personal contact list.
No doubt.
So we have everybody from we had Jamel Hill in, Kemp Powers in, who's like wrote Soul and One Night in Miami, got a
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Academy Award nominated
Right.
for, and the Spider Verse, he got an Academy Award
Come
nominated
on.
for that. We've had Joan Morgan, Brittany Cooper,
Yes.
Damon Young, Michael Harriet, Walter Mosley,
Yeah.
just a bunch of people. Amy Aniobi, who was one of the producers of Insecure.
Right.
Anthony Sparks, one of the showrunners for Queen Sugar. Benny Boom, who was in our chapter, so that
Yes.
made it easy,
Yeah.
So
Right. Right.
Benny was easy to do and everything, but we still appreciate him.
No doubt.
But all these people we brought in were people that we did not have any sense of you didn't have to have any status to be in
Yeah.
it. If you were aspiring or if you had been staffed, we did not care. And in our place, we just basically everybody was equal, and and we tried to reinforce that. I always joke that maybe it's because my family is bougie aspirational, you know.
Love that.
We are a family of 1,000 count sheets on an air mattress type of
Yes.
people, right? So we don't really have much time for people who bring airs to
Yeah.
stuff and
Come
everything,
on.
and so I think the beautiful part is that we cultivated an atmosphere of this, and and I think you run your race, and I think we ran our race, and I think we created, as my as the other Lawrence
Yeah.
said, we sought to create a legacy on Crenshaw, which is like the thing that poured
Real.
into us, the community that poured into us,
Right.
and I think we did that, and so we're not sad at all about closing. We're very grateful for
For
having had the
sure.
opportunity to do it. Yeah.
For sure. No, I just think about everything you're saying makes me think about just the importance of seasons and just the depth of time more than the length of time, because in those
You
7 years.
that's yeah, 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 because what you didn't want was for us at some point in time to lose focus.
Right.
We just if we start losing focus because we're tired, or
Yeah.
losing focus because we just didn't want to do it, but you can't, but you feel shackled to it.
Exactly.
That's not what we're looking for. And I think you know tangent, we're a co-working space, like, on the thing, but we're more of a community, and it's very rare for people to get a third space, between work and home,
So
where they can
real.
come in and laugh and be silly. Yeah, we just had a cereal eating contest, yesterday, right? You know, we do, our wives our wives say, well, Lawrence's wife said it's pretty accurate. Said that we only started the club so we could have play dates. So, which is kind of true. So, and that's kind of like, hey man, what do you think? So, like, we would do just spur of the moment stuff. We're like, because we joke around and then we try to make it happen. So,
Right.
like, and it's very hard for people who don't understand the space, why this would be funny. But we decided, we're on Crenshaw. We was like, well, maybe we need protection. So we decided we don't want a real gun. We should get a musket. and, and we figured that the action of the 45 different things of
Let's,
doing a musket would scare somebody away
that's right.
before we actually had to point it at them and shoot it, because it take a minute
Right.
to wait, hold up, put the stuff in, do the thing,
You got eight
aim,
minutes to
and you're
leave.
like, you got to aim, and you got five. Hey, look, it's gonna take me a minute to do this, but so just leave, right? That type of stuff. And we didn't get a musket, but one of our boys is a Kappa. Actually, he was like, I got a saber. He sent us the saber, so we have a saber. So
It's
it's a bunch of within the silliness and the
yeah,
absurdity is a sense of community.
for
And
sure.
and we're proud of the fact that we've had, I think, about like 10 or 11 different PhDs finish their stuff here.
Dope.
We've had just people, I've taken all my knowledge and then just put it in classes for
Yeah.
folks. So if not everybody's going to get an MFA from UCLA.
No.
All right, not everybody really should want to get an MFA from UCLA,
Real
but
true.
I can give you all the information, and more, but
Right.
for our culture. And that's kind of like, that's taking what they have
Uh,
and making it for our use, right?
yeah.
Their knowledge, and we create our own tools with it, and that's what we try to do. We
Absolutely.
are our slogan was black owned, all welcome, and then we have that on the front door.
Come
you know
on.
yeah.
And just thinking about that alone, just like the sense of like hospitality that seems like very innate within our culture. Like
Hmm.
we don't want to just like have these sort of like fiefdoms and like replicate what was done to us. We want to like
Yeah.
have our
No,
space, and we hospitable.
we're inclusive. I mean, the black folks are inclusive. We always joke, we got white members everywhere. In fact,
Yeah.
right after this interview, one of our favorite first white member cracked me up. And so, Dan, I don't know if you know Dan Fell. Dan
Uh,
Fell is big in Greek life and everything.
uh-huh.
And in fact, we had met like years before, back when I was the alumni advisor for the UCLA
Dope.
chapter, and he was at LMU, and we were trying to work out some stuff. But Dan was a big member, and we joke, called him Affirmative Action Dan, because we brought him in here he was our first white member, so he was obviously affirmative action and everything.
That's right.
And he's just a great dude, and everybody who's come in have adapted. We
Yeah.
just make sure that they understand that this is not a white centered space.
No.
We're not this was a space that we tell people that we don't whisper about white people. Okay,
Right.
so you come in here, and if you want to talk about white people, we'll talk about white people. We don't trip.
Yeah.
And they've all been wonderful. In fact, Dan said something to me. We have these debate parties, which were insane. And he said, "This is the dopest thing." He was like, "This is one of the first times that I've been in a space where I'm not the center of attention."
Come
Right. And
on.
I was like, I was just basically, working with everybody else. And he
Right.
was like, that was so goddamn good.
Yeah, of
So
course.
all of them have been wonderful people to be members of the club.
No doubt about it, man. So what
Yeah.
are your hopes for what's next? Like I know you're always working on something. Like what
Yeah.
what's coming next for
So
you?
so the first thing is I got to get back. I got some writing to get done on my personal stuff. But I'm also creating two different websites, because one of the things I'm a person who tries to solve problems, right? And that's my biggest thing. It really bugs me if I see a problem that just stays there, right? And so I'm creating two different online communities. One is a community that is going to be basically the Metaphor Club online.
Yeah.
And because we always got a bunch of people who were like, man, I would, I wish I lived in LA. Yeah,
Right.
are you guys gonna have a franchise, right? And honestly, I don't think we were ever gonna franchise. We might license something, but it's
Sure.
very difficult to do what we did because evolves our own personalities too at the exact same
Yeah.
time. So, but we could do it via kind of like a Facebook like community. And that's what I'm building right now. It's going to cost. I want to let people know it's
For
going to be
sure.
$99 a year to pay for the servers and all the rest of the stuff.
Mhm.
But it's also to prevent, I'm personally tired of folks, uh, you know, online in terms of, like anti-black, racist and
Yeah.
homophobic tropes and misogynists,
Right.
cats who who like to begin their misogyny by saying, well, the black female, when I hear that,
When
I
you're
get
female, you
triggered.
know you're in trouble. When you hear
I
that,
know I'm in trouble. And I'm
you
like,
know you're in trouble
I'm like,
immediately.
why my day got to get messed up like this? So
Right.
I'm looking for people who opt in, and I mean opt
Yeah.
in because they said, you know what, that's the type of thing. No algorithm either.
No.
And so that's that'll be launched at the end of the month, at the end of June.
Very cool.
And so if anybody wants to sign up, if that sounds like them, I'm going to send you. If you say that you like that, I'm going to send you a list of 99 reasons why not to join. Okay, because I want to make sure that if you check down that list, like you don't like intelligence,
Just-
there you go.
just
There's
don't
your
stop.
excuse.
Right.
This ain't your stop, right?
Yeah.
If you believe reading books is a bridge too far, that ain't my place, right? So I'm gonna give you 99 reasons because the dollar amount ain't gonna be the thing. It'll
No.
be these reasons that you
Right.
should check, and you go, okay, that's how you want. Because I want to make sure, because I'm not looking to be in particular a Zuckerberg, because I don't want to be that human being is, or Elon Musk. Obviously, I
Come on.
just want to build a nice community of people who. Yeah, we can have arguments. That's not the problem. You can have vigorous arguments, but have arguments that actually have some set of substance and
Yeah.
make rational decisions, and not just I'm mad at the world. So
Right.
you're the target of my mad. So I'm doing that, and then the other one is called Midlist, which actually brings together podcasters, reporters, anyone in the media,
Uh-huh.
along with authors who tend to be overlooked,
Yeah.
who are midlist authors. So, say for example, you wrote a book on tariffs, right,
Mhm.
and nobody knows about it, right?
Right.
This is a place, and you say, I want to have that episode. Then you can go to the site, you can find the author, you can read like their kind of their timeline to
Got
see
you.
how they are, and then you can book them. And that's kind of the most authors don't have that ability.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and so if you're a podcaster, for right now it's free. Okay, it will eventually be $99 a year
Oh,
to
for sure.
to do, because again, I'm not independently rich to do these
Yeah.
things, but I can solve the problem of writers trying to get their foothold,
No
because
doubt.
podcasts like you
Uh-huh.
are important, are really important, vitally important, because what they do is that they allow me to just have an organic conversation
Yeah.
without feeling like, oh my god, I don't know what I'm talking about,
Right.
that type of stuff. And if you replicate these types of conversations, that's how you sell books.
For sure.
People always believe that it's kind of like getting the lottery. If Oprah likes my book, that will be
That's the
it.
one. That's the one.
Yeah, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. You have to go out there and talk to people. And
Yeah.
I think podcasts are great because they're usually really focused on their topics.
Uh-huh.
The hosts are really well versed on what their topics are.
Right.
Like you're a great interviewer, and it
Appreciate
makes you as an author feel comfortable about talking. And
Yeah.
so what I'm looking to do is having, a lot of podcasters and a lot of authors. And I'm going to be talking to publishers um, within a couple of weeks about bringing their authors on. So,
Got you.
yeah. So, they can all contact me if they're interested in.
I'm so excited about both of those websites, but I just think they're such tremendous services because I think on the podcaster side of it, you absolutely, I know I've enjoyed speaking to artists and authors who are on their way up. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
while they were
Right.
still unknown, and then like once they reach like whether it's a New York Times bestseller or they have that song that's always on the radio, you're like, I remember talking to them when they were, trying to find their
Yeah,
way.
but the cool part is the author never forgets, right?
Real,
And
real.
and and so when you're taking a risk on, talking to them on their way up,
Yeah.
you're the first in the line when they reach that whatever
Yeah.
to go, oh yeah, 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 yeah. No, 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 no. You forget the rest of the people. They talked to me when nobody knew me, right?
Yeah.
That's how people are appreciative, right?
That's
And
a fact.
that's how it should be.
No, I completely agree. Completely agree. Like I tell you this, brother. Like it has been such a joy being able to like read your work over the years. I remember like I crossed Spring '05, and I remember reading your book, and I was just like, oh, it felt like I was reading like a holy text or something. I was like, oh wow, this is how they get that. Like, I just like was immersing myself in that, and then just seeing like your engagement online and just everything like that, like just the way that you help people process the world. I think I just want to give you your flowers, brother. Like you do us all such a great service, just sharing your thoughts like with humor and with brilliance and with just like an unapologeticness. So thank you, brother, for being who you are.
Well, brother, this is how you should look at it. Every brother, and every person, it gets inspired by somebody else, right?
Yep.
And so my inspiration of why that example of what I do is because when I was sophomore, I think it's sophomore, the chapter brought Dick Gregory to campus
Come on.
and to Berkeley, right? And I remember after the lecture, he was the coolest brother on the face of this earth.
Oh, for
Took
sure.
pictures with him. Then afterwards, he stayed for like about a good hour and a half, 2 hours. And
Yeah.
when I was talking to him, I was tripping in my brain. I was like, why is he like taking me seriously? I don't know anything. I'm only 20 years old. And and, and he took me serious,
Yeah.
right? He took me seriously. And that was kind of like how I look at things. Respect every person.
No
Every
doubt about
person
it.
is deserving of respect. Every person is deserving of humanity.
Yeah.
And if you do that, and if you live your life like that, then you will probably be on track to live a pretty damn good life.
Yeah. I totally agree. So in this theme of respect, I'll ask you one final question. Can you
Mhm.
say one kind thing about Kevin De Bruyne as a United fan, and now that he's departing City? What kind word can you say about
That he's
Kevin De
departing City. For those of you that don't know, I'm a 33-year Manchester United uh, fan, and we finished like 15th or
Ooh,
16th.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now you have to understand is that Manchester United did not start winning. It was at the beginning of the Premier League. They did not start winning until I became a fan. So
That's
you
right.
know,
That's right.
so it's 13 Premier League championships, but we've had a terrible season, and so everyone is going to get their licks in. I'm with that. I would do the exact same, but understand one thing: we are not dead. We look like it, but we're
Right.
not dead. That we will come back, and when we come back, we will find no one gloating more than me.
Oh, for sure. For sure. For sure. I can't see him. I'm looking at the top half of the table. Where they at? I don't see him.
Oh, look! I was just happy that we won the last game to make me feel good.
Yeah, that's it. That's really it. That's really it.
Oh my goodness! If we get Victor Osimhen, I'll be happy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's all I
No,
care
it
about.
should,
Yeah,
everyone's going shopping this summer. I think it's gonna be a good transfer window. So
I don't care if they go into debt or more debt,
right.
but they better they get Victor Osimhen. All's forgiven. We
Yeah,
already got
we're all
Cunha. I feel good. And we get Victor Osimhen, and then probably if we get a right back, I'll be happy too.
oh for
And
sure.
after that, yeah, we need a wing. We need a wing back. We need
Yeah,
a
yeah.
right wing back. So if we get a right wing back, we'll be straight.
There it is, man. There it is. But brother,
We start we bored these people with this soccer talk.
out of they're like and click.
Yeah.
Well, brother, this has been a joy and a pleasure, man. And for those of
Uh,
y'all who are watching, I'll be sure to post the links to the sites that Lawrence Ross is speaking about in the episode description. But you can hear us always at baddestchaplain.com. Go ahead and subscribe to that, as well as our YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you get podcasts, will be there. Until next time, y'all take care and be well.
all right, Frat.